In your paint kit, you've received detailed instructions on how to complete your painting, along with a sketched canvas of the painting you'll be doing. You've also received paint and 3 brushes: small round brush, a medium flat brush, and a larger flat brush. Now keep these brushes in water whenever they're not in use, and every time you take your brushes out of the water, dry them off. We're going to mix a color for our background now. We're going to mix with our big brush 1 really big scoop of white, a really big scoop of blue, and then a smaller scoop of black. We're making kind of a navy blue color here. This is going to be our base coat for our background. We will be doing some blending in the background later on just to make it look a little more interesting and give it some depth, but for right now we're just worried about mixing this color. When we paint our background, we want to make sure we're going all the way to the pencil marks. Doesn't matter if you run into these pencil marks, we'll take care of that later. Keep in mind when you're painting that everything can be fixed. So we're going to paint our background again, go all the way to those pencil marks. We're going to paint a couple of sections here, and then we're going to do some blending. When you blend paint, you have to make sure the paint, the base coat we're going to blend into, isn't dry. So let's go ahead and blend a little bit of white into this first section. Really softly blend that white in. I'm going to add some white to this second section as well. A little bit of blue. Notice we're blending in kind of chunky paint strokes here. This is a really funky sunflower painting, so we don't want it to look too perfect. So we're going to move on, keep painting our background with this color. So we'll paint 2 or 3 sections with this color, and then we'll go back in and do a little bit of that blending we're doing. Remember, you cannot let your paint dry or it won't blend. So you don't want to try to do this whole background first and then come back in and do the blending. Just do 2 or 3 little sections at a time and then come back and blend while your paint is still wet. So we're going to do our whole background like this. Something to keep in mind about blending. So the most important thing about blending is that you cannot blend into dry paint. The next most important thing to know is that any color you use to make a color can be used to blend into that color. So the safe colors for this painting, for blending this background, would be white, blue, and black, since those are the colors we use to make this color to begin with. Now, when you use black paint for blending, you want to use just a tiny amount, simply because a little bit of black paint goes a long way. So we'll blend a little bit of black into this section. Again, the background is supposed to be nice and funky. This is a funky flower painting. We'll go back in and add a tiny bit of black in some of these other sections too, since they're not dried yet. If you get too much of a color, just let the section dry and come back in later on and paint it again. We want to make sure we paint the sides of our canvas as well, so that when we hang them up, you don't have white sides of your canvas showing. You can also paint the bottom of your canvas. That's one of the benefits of painting these without an easel. It's really easy to get underneath and paint the bottoms. So we're going to paint the sides. Any color that goes to the edge of your canvas, always take that around the side. We're going to mix a color for our leaves and our stem next. Now this is just a base coat. We will go over it later on. So we're going to mix a nice big scoop of green. We can even mix a couple of scoops of that dark green here. So this is that green color. Then we'll mix a little bit of black. Now this color will be really streaky. Do not worry about that. Remember, this is just a base coat. We will be coming back in later and adding a lighter coat to this and doing some blending. So we're just going to start painting the stem. We'll also paint our leaves. Don't try to go over and over and over this trying to get rid of those streaks. The last thing we want to do is start pulling paint off our canvas. So even though those streaks will drive you crazy, you're going to have to leave them alone for now and let them dry. They drive us crazy too, if that makes you feel any better. So nice, long, soft paint strokes here. This is just a base coat. We want to build a little bit of depth here by doing a darker coat on the background or on the base coat of these leaves and our stem. And then when we come back in later on, we'll do a lighter coat and also do a little bit of blending in this area. And we'll wrap that green around the bottom of our canvas as well. Remember, anything that goes to the edge of your canvas, take it around the side. So we've got a nice little coat of this deep green color. Notice how streaky it is. We just want you to show, or I want to show you how streaky ours is so that you don't worry about the fact that yours is streaky as well. There's no way to avoid that, so don't worry about it at all. Next, we're going to paint the center of our flower black. Now, when you're painting this, make sure you go all the way to the edge of the pencil mark. Don't worry if you run into those petals a little bit. Later on, when we add the brown to the black section we're doing here, we're going to let that brown go outside the line some and actually kind of overlay those petals a little bit where the petals hit this black section. So we've got our leaves, we've got our stem, and now we've got the center. So we're going to let that dry for just a minute or two. And then we're going to come back in and do the second coat on our stems, or on our stem and our leaves. So we're going to mix one nice big scoop of white, one nice big scoop of yellow, and one nice big scoop of green. We're going to mix that together. It makes almost a lime green color. Now don't worry, your leaves are not going to be this lime green when we're done. We're actually going to paint the stem and the leaves with this nice lime green color. And we're going to be blending some of that dark green as well. So let's actually start off with some of the dark green. Just do a nice coat on top of the deeper color we had before. And we'll pick up some of this lime green color that we just mixed. Add a little bit of that and we'll blend those together. So we're building some depth here. We're also making that stem a little more interesting, and we'll do the same thing with our leaves. We'll paint this leaf first. We're going to go in with that. And we've still got a little bit of that lighter green on our brush. That's totally fine. You really don't need to rinse your brush here. It's actually perfect that you're going to have these greens kind of running into each other because we're trying to blend them anyway. So we'll play around with these leaves a little bit. We're going to add some of this lighter color. Every once in a while we'll pick up some of the darker color and then some more of the lighter color and just really softly blend that into our leaves. Try not to pick up too much paint. It's actually better, I mean, it's a lot easier to go back and add a little more paint than it is to take it off. Now, if you accidentally get too much paint in this section and you just make a mess with it, just know that you can leave it, let it dry, and come back in later on and go back over it again. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here a little bit. Okay, and let's blend a little bit with our fingers as well. We really like using our fingers for blending. You get just a really nice effect with that when you can use your fingers for blending. We'll pick this up so you can see it a little better. So once again, we've got a couple of different colors of green on our brush. That's totally fine. We'll pick up a little bit of the lighter color that we mixed. And then we'll add some of the darker color. We just want to make sure these leaves have a lot of depth to them. Let's blend in some more, kind of smudge it with our fingers almost. Now, when we say depth a lot when we teach our classes here in the studio, and you're also going to hear a lot of that on the videos that we'll be posting as well. We don't want our painting to look flat at all. We want to make sure that it looks like it's almost 3D, and we're building that depth here to make that happen. We're going to finish off the stem and the leaves. Rinse our brush and dry it. Now we're going to come in and start working on our petals. So for the petals, we're going to mix a nice big scoop of white, a nice big scoop of yellow. Let's add some more white to that too. So 2 scoops of white, 1 scoop of yellow, and 1 scoop of the kind of honey mustard color. Now you can play around with this color a little bit. If you want a darker or lighter or a brighter yellow or more honey mustard yellow look to it, just kind of play around with those colors a little bit, but those are the 3 colors we'll be mixing. So we're going to start painting our petals. It doesn't really matter which petal you start with here. We're just trying to start, kind of far away from our green so that we don't get that green and yellow mixing together. So we're blending a little bit of that honey mustard color and a little bit of brown into our petals. And remember earlier we talked about the fact that any color you use to make a color can be used to blend into it. So the yellow, white, and that honey mustard color are all safe colors to blend into our flower petals as well. So again, we'll blend a little bit of brown here and there in these petals. We'll blend a little bit of our white, a little bit of the raw sienna, which is that honey mustard color, and a little bit of the burnt sienna, which is the brown color. Just softly blending here. Now this painting, again, this is a funkier sunflower, so you will see a lot of brush strokes in this canvas. Don't worry about that. If that's really going to bother you later on, you can absolutely smooth it out some. That's totally fine. This is your painting. Make it yours. Don't worry if you run into the black center of your sunflower. That does not matter, I promise. We are going to come back in a few minutes, and once we start adding the brown to this black for the center, we'll go out on top of our petals like we talked about earlier. So we're just going to keep working on these petals here. Even though we're using the exact same technique and the exact same colors, or the base color anyway, on all of these petals, you'll notice they look a little different. They're supposed to. We don't want to get caught up in trying to make sure all of our flower petals look exactly the same. We want there to be some variation in these. Nice, long, soft paint strokes here when we're putting our base coat on, and then we can make those colors we're adding in for blending a little chunkier. And don't worry if you're losing, or you're definitely losing, so don't worry that you're losing those pencil marks in between your petals. We're going to do some outlining later on, and that's going to give you that definition back. So you are losing your definition right now, but do not worry about that at all. You don't want to leave. A lot of times people, when they have something sketched out beforehand, they'll try to leave the pencil mark. They'll try to paint around the pencil mark so they know later on where those lines are. Look, you will absolutely, you're going to know where those lines are. Notice we're adding a little bit more of the brown color on that leaf that's coming right between these 2 leaves. That way later on we'll be able to know exactly where one leaf ends and the next begins. I keep saying leaves. I'm not going to start this over again because I've started it 57 times already, but obviously I mean petals here, not leaves. Maybe I need to stop drinking so much when I'm doing these videos. Just kidding, Mom. Alright, so again, we're using that base coat of white, yellow, and the honey mustard, pretty equal amounts. The reason I'm saying that again is just in case you run out of the color, you can mix it again. And don't worry if it's exactly the same as the first mixture you got, because you're doing so much blending these petals anyway. See, I said petals now I said petals. Okay, again with the drinking. So the petals are going to all start off with that white, yellow, and kind of honey mustard color. But again, you're doing so much blending in those, it does not matter. If you have to mix the color again, it doesn't matter if you get the exact same mixture as you had before. So we're going to do a little bit of blending in these last few petals here. Petals, leaves, petals, whatever you want to call these. So this is really starting to take shape now. Speaking of shape, we are going to be able to do some outlining later on, and we're also going to highlight in some other colors on our petals and on our leaves and our stem as well. So we're just coming back in and adding a few more finishing touches to these petals. Make sure, again, that if you want to do anything additional to these petals, you want to make sure the background coat is still dry or it's not going to blend. If you ever try to blend something and it doesn't blend, no worries. Just go back in and add the base coat again, and then you can come back and add the blending colors on top of that. Okay, so we're going to take some of our brown paint now and start working on the center of our flower. And notice again, we are going outside of this black and on top of our petals in some places. We don't want to have a perfect black outline around this center. So again, we are going outside that black border of our center of our flower here. It's starting to almost look like a donut. And great, now I want a donut. Okay, so notice we can still see some of the black. That's perfect. We don't want a perfectly round black center. Notice it's not perfect. We're adding some of the kind of honey mustard color to this now as well. You can still see a lot of the brown underneath that. Notice how the brown and the honey mustard are blending a little bit, which is perfect. You can use your finger to smudge some of that if you want to. So we can still see some of the black underneath though. Remember, when we're building depth, the whole idea is we want to build on a color, not cover that color completely up. So let's zoom out and kind of see how we're progressing here. Okay, we're going to mix a little bit of white, a little bit of blue, right in here, and we're going to start doing some haphazard outlining or highlighting in a few places here. Now I know this seems like an odd thing to do around your green, and it's going to seem odd around those yellow petals too, but we're going to make this nice and funky by doing some highlights kind of around the edges here. Notice we're not trying to be exactly on the line anywhere. This is a really funky stroke we're doing. You don't want to try to trace this. You want it nice and funky like we're doing here. So we're using that white and blue color. You could also have used turquoise if you wanted to. Turquoise is just white, blue, and green. Whenever you want to mix a color, you can refer to page 3 of your instructions. We've got a color chart there so that you can see if you wanted to make a different color for the outlining or the highlighting here, you could absolutely do so. So we're just using you can use your small or your medium brush here, honestly, just whatever works best for you. I would start off with the small brush when you're doing little things like this, and if you feel like you want a bigger stroke, you can always move to that medium brush. So just some nice soft highlights here around the edges of our petals and also around the edges of our leaves and our stem. And you can always go back in and add more if you'd like to. I like to start off really soft with mine to begin with. Notice this blue, this light blue color. Look how it really makes those petals pop. So now you got popping petals. Oh yeah. Okay, so we're going to start adding some black now. Now, a little bit of black paint goes a long way. It's going to be our main outline color here, this black is. Notice we're not trying to be exactly on the line anywhere. In some places you'll be on the inside of the border of your petals, some places the outside, that's perfect. In some places you might be on top of your blue, this light blue color, in some places inside it, in some places outside it. That is perfect. You don't want this to look really, really intentional or traced. And notice we're not outlining every single petal or every single part of our petal. We want to make sure this looks nice and relaxed and funky. And again, not too deliberate. So we'll add a little bit of this black onto our outlining onto our leaves. We'll put a little bit onto the stems as well. So you see it's really, really starting to take shape now. So zoom in so we can let you see a little more of this black and the light blue. Now we're going to highlight with some white. White's a really stark color, so we don't want to use too much white. So notice we're just really softly adding a little white here and there. You'll use way less of the white than you did of the light blue for highlighting or outlining, or of the black. So again, the white, we're going to use way less of that. You'll notice it really makes a big difference though. It's just a real stark color, so again, don't overdo it. If you do get too much white on in an area, you can always come back in and kind of tone it down by adding a little bit of that blue and white mixture on top of it. So again, just some nice highlighting here and there. You don't need to trace all of your petals or your leaves or your stem. Okay, look at that nice outlining now. So now we've given these petals some shape without doing perfect outlining around them. Okay, so we are done. We've got a happy sunflower here dancing back and forth. We are done with our sunflower. We hope you'll join us again. If you want to order kits, you can do so at www.sipsandstrokes.com.